Hello everyone, it's Leon here and I'm joined by Phil.
Hello.
Who has been playing Gran Turismo 6, and I didn't practice that before we pressed record.
I have. I've been playing it quite a lot.
So what have you given it out of?
It's a 7 out of 10, which is quite disappointing by GT standards. There's quite a high benchmark.
So, I mean, 7 is not a terrible score, it's an okay score, but obviously some things have let it down. What has let it down?
I think so there's a couple of things. One of them is that GT always historically has sort of ushered in this new era of visual fidelity on each console, and coming at the very, very tail end of PS3, this visually doesn't look a whole lot different to GT5, which in turn didn't look all that impressive on the console in the first place. It's just a really iterative take on the GT formula, so there's more content, there are more tracks, there are more cars. A lot of that feels like it could have been DLC. The one thing that doesn't feel like it could have been administered as DLC is that there's a new handling model which feels fantastic, especially when you're in one of these. This is one of the new cars. There are about 200 new cars. So this is the Ktm Crossbow. The new handling model, there's a new aerodynamic and suspension and tyre model. They're all working together to make a more realistic handling model, and it does feel fantastic. That's the one thing that I don't think is ever going to break in GT. So now when you're under braking, that was a fantastic example of being under braking and losing the back end, because if you brake too hard, you're pushing all the weight onto the front suspension, the back end becomes really light, and if you twitch the analog stick either way, suddenly the back end's going to start twitching around. That wasn't really present in GT5, but it makes for a greater challenge in and of itself, as you can see. But you know, that's the one thing that I think justifies its existence, and that's, you know, it's a bit disappointing to have to say that in a GT.
But so, I mean, changing a handling model or changing any kind of model like that seems to be quite a risky thing to do. Whenever it's sort of happened in FIFA or any of the sports games, it's quite touch and go. So that's been sort of successfully done. That's
been absolutely successfully done. Yeah.
I think it's interesting you said about the DLC thing. So otherwise, this feels like it could almost be like just an expansion rather than a continuation.
Yeah, and I mean, we're spoiled to an extent with GT5 because they were so good at releasing DLC for that, and yes, they were so good with their free updates as well in the first place. So one of the things they did was to sort of bridge the gap between standard and premium cars. They added in like a sort of letterbox mode that gave you an almost cockpit view. It was completely black. And in GT6, they alluded to the fact that there'd be less of a gap between those standard and premium car models, and I'm calling them out. I mean, it's absolutely obvious straight away when you're browsing through the menu screens, looking at the cars, which are standard and which are premium. And there's still the kind of black letterbox mode when you're in the standard cars, so they still don't have cockpits and things. So it feels like, you know, moments like that, you just think, why didn't they just wait and make a completely new GT on PS4?
Yeah. Did you feel sort of the impact of microtransactions at all? Because that came out recently, that you can basically buy credits now instead of earning them in game, and if you wanted to get the Jaguar car, it's like £120 worth of microtransactions.
Of real world money, yeah.
Has that had any impact if you just want to play the game old style?
Not at all. I mean, I can understand people's outrage in that GT has never had cheats. It's been the one game that you have to respect and you have to grind, and you really feel like you've earned the most expensive cars because you put hundreds of hours into it. And I don't think the balance has been affected by the option of microtransactions at all. I don't think that's the controversy here. I think the controversy is that there are still these age-old problems that they were obviously aware of polyphony in GT5 that haven't been fixed, like the loading times, the standard and premium cars, and I wanted to see what it looked like on PS4, Leon.
Okay.
And I'm going to have to wait years now.
You mentioned the loading times. I mean, I cut this video and I chopped out some of the loading times because obviously you need to keep the video quite short. I mean, I wasn't cutting them out to hide them. I was cutting them out just for convenience. But they are quite long, are they?
They are quite long, and I really made sure that I'd installed it like as much as it could be installed. You know, I wasn't just like playing it off the disc. Yeah, and those loading times are still quite prevalent. Since the day one patch, they're better, but they're still there. I mean, sometimes you can be waiting 30 seconds from pressing start. Once you're in the kind of, you know, you've got the track map, you're already sort of in the game world rather than in the menus, and it can be another like 20-30 seconds before you can get to race. And given that, you know, we're at this stage of the hardware, you would expect that they were competent enough with PS3 to eliminate some of those load times by now, especially given that there's not that much more going on visually than there was on PS3, and GT5, sorry.
Yeah. You mentioned obviously a new handling model. Are there any sort of new Is there any kind of difference to the structure? Is it basically the same kind of system of, you know, get the little cars, unlock the better cars, progress that way?
Yeah, it is still that classic experience. There's still kind of
what is a good rubbish car you start off with?
Well, actually, it's weird. Previously, you've always had the choice of buying your first car, and that's sort of quite central to the experience. These days, you're given a first car. Well, you sort of have to buy the first car that it gives you. It's like some really slow Honda. But yeah, I mean, that grind hasn't changed, and that's for the better. The new content and the new sort of tweaks to the menus and things seems to favour people who aren't that familiar with GT. So there's a new suggested cars area. So there's 1,200 cars in the game in total. If you're new to the series and you just need a certain car to do a certain race, it's maybe a little bit daunting. So then there are suggested cars for where you are in the game. There's also like the Goodwood Festival of Speed. And another surprise, which we'll see at the end of this video. But so the Goodwood is you do the hill climb in the Goodwood Festival of Speed, in various cars. There's also these coffee break challenges that we're seeing here. You've got to like knock over, I think, 180 cones within a time limit. There are drift challenges. There are, how far can you go around the Nürburgring on 5 litres of fuel, things like that. So there are a couple of new additions, but I mean, most of the time you're grinding away at the races. The problem with the races as well is that the AI is untouched, so the AI is absolutely just going around on a promenade like a very old gentleman just going for his evening stroll. So
do they react to you at all? Are they sort of aware of you?
They do a little bit, but I mean, I've really tested it out. Like, I've got in front of them and then just coasted, and they are just so reticent to get past you again. And, you know, they will absolutely never try and exploit a gap while they're behind you. If you're trying to race, unless you've got a really slow car, you're not going to see them again once you've passed them. And that's really disappointing. I mean, it's almost, I mean, the AI has been so famously bad for so many games, it's almost like a legacy feature now. Maybe some fans would kick off if the AI became good and you got proper races. In single player, I'd say that the races are just a precursor to the online experience, which is pretty good. I mean, you know, human drivers are always going to trump AI, however complicated it gets.
Is it fairly smooth online? Does it sort of?
It's been very smooth so far. I mean, it's only been online for a few days as we're making this video, but yeah, it seems pretty good. It's I've got no complaints there.
And what happened to damage? Because I don't play GT Gran Turismo, but I know that damage is always a thing that people ask for. And I think, like, was it last year they sort of made bumpers? The last game they sort of made bumpers hang off a bit, and that was it.
There's a very very minor sort of cosmetic element to it. So if you prang someone in front of you, as you're going to like 10 times every race, just this new texture shows up on the back of their car with a couple of sort of smears on it. So ostensibly there's a damage model, but for all intents and purposes, the cars remain pristine to get. I mean, it must be a nightmare for their legal department to license 1,200 cars. So, I'm not crushed about the damage, but I really think that they could have done something to the AI to make the races a bit spicier.
Okay, so the menus. Did you say that they're making it more? They've made it more approachable, because that does seem to be something I've seen with a lot of big games now that maybe have got by on kind of niche appeal. They're suddenly trying to be more approachable to newcomers. It is more approachable,
yeah. And it's a cleaner menu system. There are still, so you're waiting for the cars to load in that menu there. There's still these. There's one of the standard cars, by the way. There are still these elements, but yeah, it's just a little bit cleaner. It's a better design. It's easier to get from one place to another. It's easier to get into a race. So it's gained some ground there, for whatever that's worth, that the menus are good.
Still quite slow to load. And then
there's a surprise.
And then there's this.
And then there's this.
So explain this.
I don't know if I can explain this. This is so you've got like the moon buggy from the 1960s, and you're just exploring the moon in sort of a checkpoint, like a checkpoint race. So
can you do more than that, or is it just like this is one race? Can you take this thing around like Silverstone or something?
No, I don't think. Well, I can't yet. Maybe you can buy it somewhere.
So it's just one level on the moon.
There are 3 so far. I don't know if you unlock more further into the game. I'm quite far in, and there's still just been the 3. There were 2 sort of checkpoint races like this, and then one where you're knocking over cones like the coffee break challenges. And it's a, I don't know, it's a welcome addition. It's a nice little diversion. But I don't know why it's there. I genuinely don't know why it exists.
Okay, so basically sort of an iterative version of GT6. 7 out of 10, wait for PS4, or you'd like to.
If you're a rookie, buy it now. If you haven't played it before, otherwise wait for the PS4 version in 10 years.
Cool, thank you very much.